and good practice.
Recording in progress. It's begun. Right. Hello, everybody. As you gently join the webinar, we are just going to chat amongst ourselves while technology allows everyone through the digital gates, and joins us here for the Academy of Cheese Affineur of the Year discussion of Stilton. Now, Stilton is one of our greatest cheeses. Robin will put me correctly, but I think we're talking 1720. It sort of first gets off the ground. Is that right, Robin?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's about the right sort of time. It's a pretty old cheese in for an English cheese anyway. So yeah, it dates back 300 odd years. It's been around a long time.
And it's an interesting cheese, isn't it? Because obviously it's got its roots in the whole crumbly cheeses of the Midlands and the North. But actually before about 1720, it's like magically appears, like some alien came down and taught us how to make it. I mean, it is quite strange in that aspect.
Yeah. I think sort of going back that far, a lot of dairies in and around Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire would have been making a blue style cheese, and then that has just morphed into being known as Stilton over time.
All right, well, why don't we start there, Robin? Why don't you just give us a breakdown of what makes Stilton Stilton? This sort of the 101 on why Stilton is different to other cheeses.
Yeah, well, I suppose the key ingredient is the milk. So one of the reasons Stilton has its various characteristics, its texture and its flavour is
here's one I've eaten earlier.
Yeah, got a good job on that. Is the milk, and so the milk for Stilton has always come from the traditional black and white cow or the Frisian cow, and it's synonymous. That cow is synonymous with the area around where I am now, in sort of Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire borders. And of course, it's the grassland and the terroir, but also feeds through to the milk, and again it gives it that those characteristics that are really good for making a sort of semi-hard blue cheese. There's there's quite a high clay content in the soil around here, and that does feed through to the milk, and you've got clover and different wildflowers that grow in the grass as well, and it all contributes to give Stilton its unique characteristics.
So we've got a cheese that's 7 kilos, right?
Yeah.
It is drum shaped, and that 7 kilos is pretty consistent with the sort of the Lancashires. These cheeses are all of that sort of size.
Yeah.
You've inoculated it with Penicillium Roqueforti.
Yeah.
Is that right? So in that, it's using a similar mold to all other blue cheeses of our time. The difference with a Stilton against most other blue cheeses is it's a firmer or a harder, less moisture cheese than, for instance, Roquefort or Gorgonzola or the great blues. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely got a firmer texture to Gorgonzola or Roquefort. Absolutely. Probably more similar to maybe a Bleu d'Auvergne from France. That's probably its closest relative, I'd say.
Okay. And in 3 sentences, what are the most important elements in affinage of Stilton? You pack it down into some bullet points here.
Okay, so the most important thing is to make sure the cheese doesn't dry out, which is really important because we need to keep the texture, that softer texture within the cheese. I know, Charlie, you say it's quite a hard cheese, but it does have that soft texture with it as well. It does melt in the mouth, and we really want to keep that moisture within the cheese. If you start to see cracking on the cheese, then that is a bit of a telltale sign that the cheese is starting to dry out. We also want to keep...
Number 1 is drying.
So number 1 is drying, and you can do that with temperature, humidity, but the controls have got to be there and the parameters have got to be right. So it's quite scientific, it's quite complicated.
Number 2?
Number 2 is to make sure that the blue mold stays alive in the cheese. So the blue mold is like me and you. It needs oxygen to survive and grow and thrive. So we don't want to cut off that oxygen supply. So we've got to make sure the cheese has got adequate air to breathe so it doesn't suffocate. Okay. So that means it needs good, adequate airflow.
That's
not too much.
Number three.
Number three. Okay. I did well with 2. Number 3 would be the age of the cheese. So we don't want it to get too old. We've all had old Stilton, quite mature, quite strong, quite powerful. So we've got to make sure it doesn't mature too quickly. Bearing in mind, you want to keep it and mature it in your own area and your own fridges and maturing rooms for a period of time. So you don't want it to get too mature too quickly. So the age of the cheese is really important, and to slow that aging down.
Okay, so that I'm assuming here that we're talking about the temperature is in. If you warm it up, it ages more quickly. If you cool it down, it ages more slowly. And all these competitors who we're about to meet, they received their cheese from you when?
So I think the cheese were quite young. So they would have been maybe 2 or 3 weeks old.
And a critical question is, they weren't needled, were they?
They were not pierced or skewered. Yeah.
Okay. And that leaves a lot for them to do, a lot of space for them to because how they needle it. I mean, you've been needling for, I won't say thousands of years, but certainly your Cropwell Bishops, pardon me, it's got huge experience. And we'll see how you're laughing at me there, James. I can see that. Yeah. But anyway, it's a good chance, good opportunity. Let's go to the wonderful competitors we have here. James, why don't you start here? You've done this before. This is your second year coming into the Affineur of the Wards. You did a very good job on Quick's Cheddar last year. Have you done Stilton before?
Well, no, we haven't pierced it. We haven't certainly never pierced the Stilton before. I've been aging some of Robin's beautiful cheeses in our little cave before Christmas, during Christmas, and throughout the year. Of course, it's not just for Christmas. In fact, it's a scary time to get Stilton at Christmas. I'm sure you can embellish on that, Robin. No, so first time we've ever done it. So I've been doing some research, speaking to some great people about Stilton. I was actually in the cave of Montbrison recently in France, looking at their blues as well and how they did stuff over there, which was very interesting and insightful as well for us. I think as you hit the nail on the head there, Robin, of course, you know what you're doing. This is your baby. It's about the moisture, humidity, and the way you look after your blue cheese to ensure you keep that moisture within the cheese as well. And I think the piercing is super important as well, from what I've learnt. So we pierced one side a week before the other. We went in at a special angle. I had a very special shank made for me by somebody very important that I will tell you about later on, who's well known in the cheese business, who made that for me exclusively. And we had a bit of an exercise. There's 288 holes in my Stilton.
Let's pause there. Is that an important number, Robin? I mean, Cropwell Bishop, does it have a standard number that you do every time?
We do, but we do have a standard number, and 280 does sound a good amount, actually. Yeah. Size of the needle is quite important as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see our Stilton just here. Stilton is called a foxy blue, excuse me. I have a fox red Labrador, and her name is Blue, so we called it Foxy Blue. Makes sense. Deliciously foxy red as well on the outside, hopefully with a heart of blue, like my lovely Labrador has as well. We've been very careful to maintain as much moisture as possible. We've pierced it slightly, I think slightly later than you do at Cropwell Bishop from my research. And I've done that to try and maintain a little bit more moisture. And we're trying to increase airflow and a little humidity to try and get those lovely little molds dance around. I think the airflow within that chamber that I built for it within my small cave has been draped with a little fan to ensure we do a little puff of air occasionally to ensure that those molds are flying around and having a bit of fun.
That sounds impressive. That sounds very impressive. Johnny, Indie Food, do you know how many holes you've put in your Stilton?
Hi, Charlie. Hi, Robin. Hi, guys. No, I don't. At a guess, maybe 183.
183. So is that the bottom end of the spectrum, Robin?
Yeah, no, yeah, probably that is it may be enough. It may be enough, but it will depend. They could be larger holes than normal. It will depend. It will really depend on the conditions. Yeah.
Johnny, at Indie, do you have a history of affinage of this kind of cheese or any kind of cheese? Tell us a little bit about your business.
A little bit about Indy. So we're based in Cumber and Belfast in Northern Ireland. We've been going for about 7 years, but we opened our first dedicated, I'm going to say, cheese shop on the Ormo Road in Belfast around 2.5 years ago. And in that, we built our own little sort of micro cheese cave. Mm-hmm. In there, we're doing, a little bit of very basic affinage. It's just been, I'm going to say, purely cheddars, harder Alpine style cheeses to date, all Irish cheeses. So we haven't had a go with Stilton. We've got a very good neighbour of ours, a very talented guy called Mike Thompson, who makes Young Buck over here, which is a lovely.
He's got a really good reputation now. He's been going for about 12 years, or am I wrong about that?
Mike started just before me. I'm going to say maybe 8-9 years old. Okay. Mike's been going. So yeah, he's just about 5 miles down the road from here, and it's our best-selling cheese. He's done a fantastic job with that. I've had, been fortunate over the years to be close to Mike and had the chance to, work alongside him down his cheese laboratory, and I got useful hints and tips. So I guess that was definitely the inspiration to try and out.
What was his one tip there for Blue maturing?
I can't repeat it. It's got a lot of expletives. Just don't something it up. Yeah. Okay. No, I think James hit the nail on the head. It was, he tried to keep me right on the temperature, the humidity, and obviously those wee bits of airflow as well. So trying to keep it as simple as possible, not trying to balls it up. We had it down in the shop. We actually found a leak in our humidifier sort of in the early days of it. So I've moved it actually up to my home where I keep a little dedicated cheese fridge, which is sort of temperature controlled and that. So let's see what happens.
Roy Brindisi, so in the Spanish cheese tradition, there are some really amazing blue cheeses, particularly up on that sort of top coast against the Bay of Biscay, but they're brutally blue in theirs, and slightly softer cheeses. So what are you bringing a Spanish twist on your interpretation of Stilton?
So we always do try to give it a twist, and also to create a conversation between us and some of our producers, and asking them questions that we normally don't, to get this thing right. So we've been talking and also learning a lot about the things that we actually sell, because you look at them from a different point of view. That is the point of view of starting things to happen. So we are going to give it's in a room surrounded by Spanish cheeses. So by now, I think he's fluent in Spanish. And what we're going to do, we're going to spray some cultures on the cheese at the second stage that comes from a cheese that we all admire. We don't sell it in Brindisa, we don't work with it, but we do admire the cheese and the way that it's made. Probably Gamoneo, from that region exactly where you just mentioned, from the north, from Asturias. And it will be very interesting to see how it affects the cheese. Right now, the cheese has a lovely rind. It's lovely. It looks like delicious already. I hope it keeps going that way. Humidity and temperature for us are important. So, and also placement of the cheese. At the beginning, we had it next to the door where there is more airflow around, for the same reason that previously is being said, just to keep things going around. Now we move it to a different place where it's more quiet, more surrounded, more secluded. So just to keep that rind as it is, because I don't want it to dry, because it looks lovely right now.
Yeah, a moist, almost smear rind is intrinsic to the Stilton. So Emmanuel at Jaws and Joseph, give us the one sentence about your company, and then I'm interested about the point which I was completely unfamiliar that James was talking about, piercing it on one side and then the other. Is that something that you were aware of, and have you done it? And do we all feel like we should all be doing side-by-side piercings now?
So what we've done, basically, we've pierced the cheese on the old cheese in once. Maybe we are a massive fan of blue cheese. I'm a massive fan of Roquefort, so I wanted it really blue. So we've made 423 holes in it.
Wow. Okay.
So, and I'm not used to this affinage stuff, so it's a real honor to me as a French person to be part of this challenge. All the team is enjoying it as well. Alice, Nick, and Stephen Fleming. So we are all really excited every day. I've got a supervisor, which is my uncle in Savoie. He's a monk making a famous cheese tamier in an abbey. So he's just supervising us with this. So,
well, do you have like Zoom calls with your cheese?
Sort of, yeah. So yeah, what we've done, we're keeping the Stilton in the shop in a tall fridge. The challenge was to avoid having too much air blow on it first. So we've made sort of affinage box, but we wanted the customer to be able to see the process as well. So we've placed some perspex on in front of it. So it's really nice. I've got some. I do not have the cheese, but I have some picture with me just to show you how it's now. So this is the guy. I don't know if you can see.
Okay,
So
I love that. We're all leaning in. Yes,
That looks great.
it is. You've got quite a sort of a moist look. I mean, Robin, you're going to be able to tell better than I. That's quite a moist looking orangey skin. So that's at the moist end of the spectrum, would you say?
I think that looks really good. Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Hold on the top. That looks yeah, almost, yeah, really good.
Geotricum, is that the name?
Okay.
Yeah, of this mold, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, so his name is Nat, as the monk is Nathanael, so I've called him Nat. So it's like a good mood for him. Yeah, so we've done this with we've pierced it with knitting needle, basically. So it was great fun doing this, like probably in the olden days, I think so. Maybe
We use knitting needles from time to time when we're like doing trials and stuff. They're a really good way of piercing cheese, funnily enough. Yeah. So
Okay, I'll ask for that in my stocking.
yeah.
so
Emmanuel, so how long have you had it?
we had this one on the 25th of it's like 1 month now.
So much. So what are the indications that you're seeing? What are the visual changes during the period that it's been under your care?
We've seen the mold outside developing, the color changing as well. So it was something amazing to us because it came basically quite suddenly. So it's amazing how fast it's developed on the outside.
So it was not molded. There was no significant mold when it was received, and all that floor has come during your care.
Yeah, it was basically definitely white, fairly white. There we go, like this. It was definitely white.
I can just about see that. Can I ask that you send these through to Tracy, and we'll put them up on the Instagram feed or something like that, so people can see that. That would be really valuable from all the team.
Okay, yeah.
So turning to Jazz at Paxton's, is your cheese on show? Where's yours?
No, so I'm based in our Cotswold maturation room, so we don't actually have like a public site there. But we moved into the site in kind of January 2022, so we're using this as an experience to kind of learn more about our 5 maturation rooms that we're working within. So the Stilton has been living in maturation room 3, which is typically our washed rind room. So it's quite warm and humid in there. We haven't actually pierced yet, which it seems everybody else has. So I decided to pierce at 6 and 8 rather than 4 and 6. Wanted to see if I could get the curd to break down a bit more and get a bit more development on the rind before I pierced. So I'll be piercing for the first time tomorrow. Should be interesting.
That is interesting. That is interesting. And I mean, I'm assuming that we're all piercing. Well, I'm not doing it, but from the sides. There's a history, Robin. You don't pierce from the top, do you?
No, you don't. You pierce from the side, and that's why you get that veining or marbling effect through the cheese. If you pierce from the top, you're going to get more pockets of blue forming through the cheese. But it would be quite interesting to see what a cheese looks like if it was pierced from the top. I don't think I've ever done it from the top.
Has any of the assembled pierced from the top? Well, Jazz, maybe there's an opportunity for you right there. You know, you can
I was
come
gonna say, I
in.
feel like I'm being baited now to pierce from the top and see what happens.
Come
do a
on,
bit of
you know
both.
you want to. Come on, take the cheese in a completely new direction, just by, you know, putting it from the top. That's really interesting. And is your experience the similar from Emmanuel's, that the cheese you received was relatively clean? I mean that in a kind of good way.
So
And
when we received the cheese, it was 2 weeks old, and it was very naked, pure white. So we've been kind of taking photos of it each week, and it's amazing to kind of see the difference. So at the moment, it's quite orange and sticky. Like when I've been turning it kind of every other day, and it's very sticky when we're turning it. But we're keeping it kind of 85 to 89% relative humidity, so quite high. But I quite like that it's sticky at the moment. I might not say that tomorrow when I'm piercing it, but
yeah. And I'm assuming that everyone else here has got a mixed maturing room or a sole maturing room. You having a pure washed rind maturing space, which means you're almost certain to get a greater preponderance of the washed rind bacteria rather than molds on your skin.
Yeah, so I was interested to see what would happen if we kept it in that room. Typically we keep the Cropwell in maturation room 1, which is kind of a bit cooler, so 12 degrees, and about 80% humidity. But getting this cheese so young, I wanted to see what would happen if we kept it in the wash rind room for pretty much all of its life. And see what the coat looks like at the end.
So the God of Cropwell Bishop, what do you think?
Well, has anyone been so have we been turning the cheese?
Yes.
Yeah, regularly. Yeah. So that's good. So all the cheese were deliberately sent out before any mold or anything formed on them. So they all went out very white and untouched, as it were. So that all the mold development and all that stuff will be down to you guys. So it's fascinating it would be fascinating to see what the results are with the different mold that forms on the coats and the way the coats form, and even more fascinating to see the blue in the cheese and how much blue grows, and then the curd breakdown.
We've had Nick join us from the Fine Cheese Company. Good afternoon, Nick. I got a text saying you pierced today. Is that right?
We did our second piercing today.
Second piercing today.
Exactly. I have a lovely little picture of that one, because me and our technical manager, Martin Knapp, were up to no good with that. So I don't know if you can see that on there, but there's us working on that
just
beautiful
about,
thing. Yeah. So it's really fantastic. We've had a lovely our process has been basically to create a dedicated maturation space for this cheese. We don't usually mature blue cheese. Rather we hold it at a colder temperature. So we've created a really wonderful environment for the Stilton and surrounded it with other Stiltons. What we really wanted is both for the bacteria to start to spread from one cheese to another and kind of to encourage that. Also for a mycelial network to start to communicate, so that we might have a lovely little coating of mold start to come onto there, not just from the cheese itself, but from the cheeses around it. And also to really hold humidity quite well. You know, the thing is, if you have a cheese all by itself, it's going to be really, really difficult to build that consistent humidity that it needs to mature. And so by having these other cheeses around it and similar cheeses at that, that's what we're trying to accomplish. We have a slightly democratic process. You know, there's a small team of us who are really dedicated to the Affineur of the Year competition here. And so some of the more wild ideas that there have been vetoed. Some of the less ambitious ones.
Let's hear them.
There was an idea to surround this with completely different blues, which would have been interesting, but I think both off of the back of really our consciousness of micro testing and making sure that the blue is not just developing well, but is safely developing well, we've held off on that a little bit. We have been discussing doing a little something similar to what Roy was talking about. I don't have jamoneu, which is a cheese I love, but I do have some picon bejes tres viso, and I do have some lovely roquefort. And I've been thinking of maybe having these actual limestone cave strains of penicillium communicate with a non-limestone cave strain of penicillium. For now, we're not doing that, but that is something we are still considering with it. It is a very live and living cheese. Total piercings. So the first time we pierced it, I think on the sides in total was about 176, if I remember correctly. I haven't top pierced it, but I have replicated where usually a machine would be holding it, because he doesn't pierce it, but it does have those little
Yeah,
bars.
no, I have for about a couple of years. I was going, yes, Stilton is pierced from the top. Here are the holes.
So
I realized that is that common mistake. That's just the clamp.
We were lucky to find that out ahead of time. So I have replicated those little clamp holes because it still does create a small pathway, but nothing too deep on there. So we've been doing the sides as they would be that way. And we pierced today. So I think in total, we probably have about 300-ish holes, maybe a little under.
Okay. Okay. So the range seems to be that sort of 200 to 400, that sort of thing. And it's going to be interesting to see. And I think on the day, it would be useful if you guys said how many holes you pierced it, so that the consumers or the judges could see if there is an influence. So one of the, Robin, I was lucky enough to talk to you about, your amazing Cropwell Bishop Stiltons, and I've said this to the team, there are 4 things that you try to avoid. One is not enough bluing, slumping of the cheese, getting the cheese to be perfect when it's sold or ready for consumption, and you don't break any PDO rules. And I'm just going to, go into the PDO rule thing. Is it still allowed to be called Stilton if it's affineured outside of your 3 counties of Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, and Leicestershire?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Nat, and I'm not 100% sure whether it can be. I'd have to have a look at the our Stilton rulebook tomorrow morning, but I have a feeling that it's probably okay, because essentially the cheese was produced in one of the 3 counties, and the milk is obviously from one of the 3 counties. So I think it's all right.
Because there was that case, I'm sorry if I'm nerding out here, when Parma Ham was took Asda to court, and all Asda was doing was slicing it outside its region, and they won, and they had to send it back to the Parma region for slicing. So, but maybe it varies rule book by rule book.
Yeah, that's right. So Parma Ham has to be sliced and pre-packed in the Parma Ham region, whereas Stilton and most other cheeses, as we know, can be cut and wrapped on a cheese counter. So I think it's all right. I think we're okay. So I think you can all call your cheese a Stilton of some sort.
Well, I was going to ask, actually, Charlie, on that note, has anyone thought about what they would ccall it if it wasn't being called Stilton?
Well, so we're going to give it a first name and a surname. We've got Blue Fox, and then it's going to be in the style of Stilton, or a CB special. We could come up with all sorts of names there. So maybe we'd ask the people to send that in the chat, or put that on Twitter, or the suitable Instagram thing. Names for Stilton that have been affineured under the specialist care of some of the finest and most experimental cheesemongers in the UK. In taking this forward, are there any? The big one is the bluing, isn't it? And is there any way to tell, as you're progressing the cheese, Robin, that you can pass on to others as to whether the bluing is working?
Well, yeah. So as to the age of when you pierce a cheese, because I know Jazz is about to pierce hers, and she's worried she may be too late. I don't think you need to worry too much. There's no right or wrong with this. It is just an experiment. So if you don't pierce your cheese till 6 weeks, I think that's fine. We changed the periods of time when we pierce our cheese depending on the time of year and various other things. So there's no hard and fast rule with it. You won't see any blue development after your you need to do 2 piercings. So after the first piercing, it's unlikely you'll see any blue in the cheese. And to detect the blue in the cheese, you need to have a look inside it. And I'm sure you guys have all got a cheese iron to do that. So you just want to have a look inside it and see how it is progressing. But you should start to see some blue mold development after the second pierce. And if you haven't seen any blue mold development after about 7 days after the second pierce, then you need to potentially start to think about maybe you need to move the cheese to a different location, get some air to it, and various other things.
Okay, that sounds
Yeah.
like one of those, nervous moment as you raise your cheese on. Now, I remember you telling me, or perhaps Robin, I can't remember if you were talking about Crop or Bishop or someone else. This, like, you need to grade it at the bottom and at the middle, because there's a good chance you could have patchy blue.
Yeah, we tend to grade it at the bottom and then at the top. Probably not in the middle, because that's where you're going to find the majority of the bluing. So to make sure the cheese is bluing consistently throughout the whole cheese, we tend to grade it maybe an inch and a half from the bottom and from the top, and that will usually tell us whether the cheese is maturing well. And you should start to see the blue appearing right in the middle, so right at the end of the cheese iron. Don't worry too much if it's not progressing all the way out to the end or the rind. That will happen in time. But you also want to have a look at the texture. So if you need to make sure the cheese has still got an open texture on the cheese iron. If it's starting to close up and go a bit like a cheddar texture, and you haven't got that much bluing, then maybe you probably need to start worrying at that point. But you need to keep ironing the cheese. So keep looking at it and assessing how it's going. That would be my advice. That's what we do all the time.
So sorry, one last question there. So how often do you iron? Once a month? Once every couple of weeks?
No. Every couple of days.
Oh, interesting.
Just be careful. Don't want to ruin the cheese. So use a small cheese iron. We tend to use small ones rather than the cheddar ones. So if you've got a small cheese iron, use one of those. Yeah.
So has anybody tasted that cheese? Okay.
We've tasted a bit that's come out as we've pierced. So we haven't done an iron yet, but it's interesting because what we have tasted that's come out of the interior. First of all, Robin, I wish people knew how delicious the Stilton is before it turns blue, because it's a really good, moist, salty territorial cheese. It has that flavor to it already. When we tasted a little bit that came off of our piercing needle today, we could already taste a very, very small influence of change from the first piercing. It didn't really taste blue yet, but there was a little small kind of almost fermenty difference that I hadn't noticed before. But it's really delicious to begin with, which I didn't quite realize about a Stilton at that age.
So yeah, it does have a nice flavor when it's younger, and it's quite like a white Stilton actually when Blue Stilton is younger. And we were having a discussion today in the office about white Stilton, because it's very underrated cheese, white Stilton, and it is delicious. Yet it is not as widely appreciated as we would like. But yeah, no, you're right. It is a nice tasting cheese even when it's young, and that blue mold will, as you know, with Stilton is a mold ripened cheese, so the blue mold is absolutely imperative to maturing the cheese. So you've really got to do your best to encourage that blue mold to grow. That's the most important thing.
Just picking up on that point, I had always presumed that white Stilton was just unblued Blue Stilton, but you're implying from what you said there that there is a difference between unblue Blue Stilton and white Stilton.
Yeah, white Stilton's a completely different cheese.
Oh,
so Charlie, I think you've made the point how that white Stilton is misunderstood in the industry. It's a crumbly territorial cheese halfway between a Lancashire and a Wensleydale.
Okay.
And it's a lovely cheese in its own right. So if you like Lancashire and you like Wensleydale, you will really like white Stilton. They're all from the same family, I suppose, of cheeses. Yeah. English territorial crumbly cheeses. But it is unfortunately for white Stilton, the brand white Stilton, I think, destroys the whole cheese, because people naturally think it's something to do with Blue Stilton, and it's just like, I don't know, a rubbish Blue Stilton. So it needs to be probably rebranded. Anyway, we're going off.
That is slightly off piece. We've had Martin join us. Martin, welcome. Do you want to unmute yourself? So you are coming here from the Courtyard Dairy. You've been maturing cheeses. Oh, have I got that wrong?
I'm the second representative from the Refined Cheese Co. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what happens if I
Nick and I
Google
weren't
things
sure who
while
would be
I
able to take
should be
it.
watching this. Okay. So how do you want to add something that perhaps to what Nick's saying, or maybe you didn't hear what he's
I
saying?
mean, I missed Nick's introduction, but he's always got a way with words, and I'm sure he said everything that I would want to say. It's
What he did say was that you had some wild ideas that were vetoed. I would like to know what those wild ideas were.
I suppose because obviously we have the cheese rooms we have a wide variety of cheeses available to us, and we're spoilt for choice in terms of what we could get our Stilton to share space with. As it stands, it is sharing space only with Stiltons, and the rather conservative decision made was that we would try not to introduce any too wild elements to it. But when Nick and I were looking at the cheese just today, we were scratching our heads about that and just wondering, if we want to make this a bit more interesting, we have.
You can't be more interested in a Cropwell Bishop Stilton. I mean, that's just impossible.
But it might be interesting to see what happens if that cheese shares a bit of space with one of the many other blues that we have from all around Europe and the world, or even with one of our non-blues. That's I guess in terms of development, we're liking the look of our cheese at the moment, but it hasn't done a lot in terms of the development of bloom and so on the rind, and therefore we thought we still got the chance to influence it to do something different and remarkable. And so yeah, that's a decision for us to make, probably in a.
You've got 6 weeks, haven't you?
Scale. Yes.
So we're roughly halfway through, give or take. I mean, I'm finding this interesting because you've gone, if I can put it this way, quite traditional, whereas Jazz has said sod tradition. You are hot housing yours effectively.
Yeah.
With some, people, I've just seen in the chat here that the bacteria are generally not airborne, but with that much bacteria knocking around your washed rind, you're just going to get a bacteria fest on the side of your cheese. Yeah,
very orange. We've got some white kind of bloomy molds coming on, but yeah, predominant rind is orange and sticky currently. So from what we're hearing, how much variation, just going around the room, do you think we're going to get in taste here? Because I know, for instance, James, when you were competing with Quicks last year, you had to be attentive. There was notable differences between the cheddars, but they were sort of expressions of tone rather than character. Is that a fair representation? From what we're seeing, we're going to see a possibly a much wider variation in flavors and, well, breakdown here.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think what is very important is, as far as affinage is concerned, is time and humidity. That's obviously the triage, the cheese, the time, the humidity within, and the triage, the way we're looking after the cheeses, the way that we turn the cheese, the way that we monitor the cheese every day to ensure that it's being and doing what it should be, it's behaving properly, and we need to make adjustments to suit it, because we're not all, unfortunately, we don't have cave environments naturally, not me at least, and we have to try and make those environments work. So with a cheese like this, if you take history into account, the caves of Roquefort, for example, and the way that the spores were transferred, etc., from the bread to the cheese, and how that all developed, there's a massive alchemy to this cheese. It's incredible. And we have to just be very careful. You can stick cheeses together, and I think, as Sue Sturman, we should say hi to, incredible, from Makers and Mongers, is online as well, has quite rightly said they don't dance in the air, but if you're close to each other, we may be able to get that mycelial network talking to each other. It's a fascinating process, and I'm very proud to be part of this, thanks to the brainchild of this being started last year. So yeah, great.
It's a fascinating experiment. I can sort of look into Robin's eyes going, he wants to know. You do want to know the answers here, don't you? Robin, speaking, you're curious to know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be it's going to be really great to see what the outcomes are. I suppose something to consider will be once there's enough blue in the cheese, you then got to think about the temperature that you hold the cheese at, because the warmer the temperature, the more the cheese will mature, the quicker it will mature, and the quicker those flavors could go over the top.
Yeah.
So you've got to, so that will be up to you guys, I suppose, to judge that, and that's the skill of it. But that's something to look out for. When is the cheese ready, and when do I then need to think about changing things to make sure it stays as good as it is now and doesn't go over the top? Or it may be a slow developer, and you may have to do things differently to try and develop it quicker as those 6 weeks move along and we get close to that deadline.
However, Robin, I mean, I've been looking at some data, and it's quite interesting because mold, Penicillium roqueforti, it moves and develops at low temperatures as well as high temperatures. So you can keep your Stiltons in 4 to 6 or 6 to 8, and you can still get the same amounts of blue development, which has been proven.
I mean, that's how you manage
That's
Christmas,
right.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So the blue development will happen. So they will grow in the cheese, but remember that blue is then going to act on the curd and break the curd down from quite a grainy texture, which Nick, you've probably experienced at the moment if you've tasted some of that younger cheese, and it breaks down to a more creamy, buttery texture. Now that does need a little bit more heat than cold, but that's the judgment.
Yeah.
That's the trick, I suppose.
That's a really interesting point, because there's 2 types of mold development, isn't there? There's the breaking down of the paste, and then there's development of the flavor through the mycelium, and you need both to happen. And you're saying temperature. Oh, we've lost Robin there. Oh no, he's back. Temperature will affect those 2 processes in different ways.
Yeah, it will. It will.
I'm loving this. It's almost science fiction. It's like Jazz is making her 12 weeks into 14 weeks, and we're bending time with temperature. Is that a bit over the top, or is that about right?
The curd breakdown. So the mold is acting on the fats and the proteins within the cheese, and that is accelerated with a higher temperature, definitely.
So, Roy, when we think of cheeses in the north of Spain, things like Cabrales and all that kind of stuff, so apologies for the pronunciation. I mean, Cabrales is quite a dry cheese that then is put in an incredibly moist environment with it almost, the water from the cage almost drips onto the cheeses. I mean, you're not mad enough to try something like that, are you?
No, we are not. But what we did with these was something different for what we do normally with blues. We keep blues in a different room, and we put this Stilton in a room that we never keep the blues. So it's surrounded by no blue cheeses. So it's much warmer there. It's humidity-wise, it's quite humid. It never goes below 85. What you just say with these very blue cheeses in the north of Spain, like for example Cabrales, that is a really rustic kind of primitive flavors. We are not aiming
pungent, aggressive, huge.
Yeah, it could be aggressive. We are not aiming for that with this Stilton, definitely no. But it's interesting to hear everyone and about the cheese placement and keeping it with other cheeses and all that, because for us to put it on a room that we never keep blues, you know, it was a decision that it had to be agreed with the whole of the team and the different departments, because obviously we keep their other things. So everyone needs to be aware of what is happening in the room, all the different departments. And yeah, I'm very happy that the cheese is there at the moment with no blue cheeses. We just pierced the cheese a few days ago. So I think it was Tuesday when we pierced it. We pierced it with a needle that had a little pink cloud as a fist holder. I don't know who brought it to the office, but it just was the perfect tool for the job. So yeah, it was really interesting to know about. We didn't count the number of times that we pierced the cheese, but I think I'm on par with all of you with the first piercing. I'm also very happy to hear that, Jazz didn't pierce hers. Will be really interesting to try yours, because we hold it as much as we could, but the competition is just there. And we were thinking like, we cannot play with the temperature as much as with other cheeses, because it has to be in this room where it is at the moment. So we had to pierce it this week, because it's, as you say, 6 weeks away.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it does. I mean, we're obviously focusing on what's happening to these Cropwell Bishop Stiltons, but there's a possibility that it will bring influence to the cheese spaces, the affinage spaces where it's housing. It will offer something back to the places where it's being homed. I mean, is anyone concerned about? I mean, obviously, Roy, you're talking about that. You've got to keep the other cheeses on their journey, but maybe there's going to be a Cropwell Bishop, Penicillium Rock 40 baby going on in there somewhere.
For us was to understand what it will happen if we bring the cheese inside, how this will affect the room to never have blues. And our understanding was that this was perfectly fine to bring the cheese into the room. Even we had the cheese very isolated at some point, but now we had it just surrounded by everyone else is around it. And I think that will benefit the cheese, and the cheeses around it won't get affected. Like Manchegos is a hard rind cheese, so it's not gonna, I don't think it will affect it that much.
What about you, Emmanuel? Is that something you've concerned about? I mean, sorry, Ruben. Is there any way for it to? I mean, you've got yours in a special counter on its own. I think it's. Am I right in saying it's the only one that's got its own space? So it's got to do its maturing all by itself.
Yeah, I think we've got kind of isolate ours, so it's not affecting the other cheese in that fridge. So it's not a maturing room. So we definitely had to create a specific space for him. So yeah, so it's not affecting anything, no.
So in a funny kind of way, your cheese, does it have a name?
Nuts.
Nuts, that's right. Your cheese is almost pure Cropwell Bishop. It's only time and temperature you're playing with. You're not talking about introducing further molds, further bacteria, further.
No, it's just like, yeah, basically temperature and humidity. Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. So Roy, what about, sorry, Johnny, what do you think is going on in your maturing room? Because you say you've now moved it into your safer space.
Yeah, it's just in a dedicated wine fridge. Again, I had, a little concern about the blue infiltrating the other cheeses in the maturation space. So that, along with the humidity concerns, that's why we moved it into the little wine fridge. All it's literally got for company is a couple of bottles of tonic wine. So if that's in any way a good influence, we will wait and see.
So no one's, it's interesting there, because I was in the public garden at one point, and they did that thing with putting a bottle of port upside down into I think it was 3/4 Stilton, left it there for, I'm guessing, about a week and a half before Christmas, but used it as a feature to sort of get their customers interested in Stilton running up to Christmas. No one's interested in going that far out, of actually beginning to flavor the Stilton in some way. There is history there. Anybody want to risk that one?
Yeah, we tried it last Christmas and a couple of Christmas with Young Buck. Actually, we combined it with Buckfast wine from Buckfast Lee Abbey. Yeah. So we had it was
famous
called
for its quality. Yes.
Yeah, it was called Bucky Buck, and yeah, it sold really well. It was nice contrast.
So that no one's tempted to sort of lop off a third sort of a week before the end and pour porter over it then.
I was about to do that with port, to be fair. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That will certainly increase the diversity across the range. Well, I have to say, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to everyone. Have anybody got any questions for each other before we sign off tonight? You clearly know exactly what you're doing. Oh, look, there we have it. That
looks gorgeous.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's maturing. It's maturing nicely, isn't it?
So, Robin, your professional opinion. Okay, has everyone else got their cheeses? There's James's. And it is different, isn't it?
Yeah,
Isn't it interesting?
they'll all be different, and there's no right or wrong. They're all just unique.
Oh, it's going to be a joy
look great.
tasting this lot.
Yeah.
It is going to be such a joy tasting this lot. Right. Well, I'm absolutely loving everything everyone's brought to the table. I'm really fascinated by where we're seeing these differences. It is really about the, you know, the flora on the outside, the size of the holes, the number of holes, as people are trying to find their own way. So I hope the people who are watching this have enjoyed their introduction to the masterclass in the varieties of maturing Stilton. James, you talking to me? You're going to hug it next? Do you sleep with it? No, that's a very bad question. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's participated in tonight's discussion. Remember, it is Tracy's going to kill me, the 14th of June, isn't it? The 14th of June, where we are collecting in London. We will be tasting these wonderful cheeses, and you two who are watching this can come along. The tickets are available on the website, or if you know one of the competitors, I'm sure they'll bring you along or something like that. But the more people and merrier who taste this fantastic diversity, this massive experiment in one of the greatest cheeses this country has to offer. And thank you so much for Robin at Cropwell Bishop for sponsoring this and allowing it to come forward with such a great cheese to work with. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Bye now.
Bye now. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.